The British supermarket landscape of today has transformed into a fierce battleground of gamified loyalty schemes, data harvesting smartphone apps, and sleek architectural redesigns engineered to keep you browsing. Supermarket giants are constantly fighting for your attention and your data, with Tesco splashing club card prices across every aisle and Sainsbury's pushing nectar points on your weekly shop. Even the discount kings, Aldi and Lidl, are locked in an endless arms race to build the most aesthetically pleasing and ruthlessly curated shopping experience possible. The entire industry is obsessed with appearing premium while promising low prices, desperately trying to prove they are the undisputed supermarket of the future. Then, sitting quietly on a retail park or a slightly weathered high street, you have Farmfoods. Stepping inside one of their stores feels like walking through a portal directly into a bygone era of retail. You're greeted by basic tiled floors, unapologetically bright fluorescent lighting, and a sprawling labyrinth of industrial chest freezers. These massive units are packed to the absolute brim with giant bags of chicken nuggets, bulk buy household essentials, and recognizable chocolate brands stamped with prices that seem almost suspiciously cheap. The overall aesthetic sits somewhere between a wholesale warehouse and a giant bargain bin. To a casual observer, this business model looks like a complete disaster waiting to happen. The company blatantly ignores every single established rule of 21st century retail survival. They don't have a flashy app to track your buying habits, and they refuse to engage in targeted digital marketing campaigns. You can't even get a loyalty card to shave a few pence off your total at the till. Yet, recent company filings reveal that this unassuming chain has quietly smashed past the £1 billion mark in annual turnover. While competitors are frantically streamlining operations to survive, Farmfoods is expanding its store count, hiring hundreds of new staff, and aggressively moving into fresh territories across the United Kingdom. They're achieving this massive growth in a brutal economic climate where inflation, crippling energy costs, and wage hikes are aggressively eating away at profit margins across the entire retail spectrum. This is the story of how an old-school Scottish freezer chain completely ignored the tech revolution, leaned heavily into the chaos of the discount bin, and built a massive empire right under the noses of the biggest supermarkets in the world. The stubborn DNA of farm food makes perfect sense once you realize who actually built it. This billion-pound empire began in 1954 as a gritty, straightforward meat processing business in the Scottish city of Aberdeen. The mid-50s was an era long before giant mega supermarkets dominated the United Kingdom. Back then, the British public bought their dinners by walking down the local high street and chatting with the independent butcher, the baker, and the neighbouring greengrocer. The founders of Farmfoods understood the Scottish meat trade intimately from the ground up, and they spent their early years mastering the raw logistics of the food supply chain, learning exactly how to process massive volumes of meat while understanding the extreme importance of keeping operational costs down in a hard-working industrial city like Aberdeen. This relentless focus on the back-end logistics meant it actually took them over 15 years to open their first dedicated retail space. They patiently bided their time and perfected their systems before finally launching a physical butcher shop on Barron Street in the 1970s. By the 1980s, the widespread invention and adoption of the home chest freezer fundamentally changed the way British families bought and consumed their meals. Suddenly, working-class households could buy their food in massive bulk and safely store it for months at a time to stretch their budgets. The leadership at Farmfoods saw this and pivoted the entire business hard. They confidently transitioned from being a traditional local butcher into becoming a dedicated frozen food specialist to meet this booming demand. By the end of the 1980s, this pivot had grown into a network of 30 stores primarily located in Scotland, all operating on a ruthlessly simple premise. Rather than wasting money on store aesthetics, Farmfoods kept their overheads as low as possible and funneled every single penny of those savings directly back to the customer. This paid off massively, and by the 90s, they were pushing so much product that they were able to expand into England itself, gobbling up smaller chains like Capital Freezer Centres and Wallace Frozen Foods. Now, when you think about discount supermarkets today, Aldi and Lidl immediately come to mind. These European powerhouses completely rewired the British grocery market by mastering the art of the curated, highly efficient shopping experience. You walk in, find a strictly limited selection of high-quality private label goods presented in a clean, logical format, and you walk out. Farmfoods competes so aggressively with Aldi and Lidl on price that financial analysts often lump them into the exact same category. But the actual shopping experience couldn't be more different. Aldi's aisles will have perfectly uniform boxes stacked neatly on pristine shelves where every single product has a predictable, dedicated home. Meanwhile, Farmfoods is well known for its massive industrial chest freezers dominating the floor space. Alongside those, you'll find towering pallets of bulk toilet paper dropped right in the middle of the walkway alongside giant ripped cardboard boxes overflowing with heavily discounted energy drinks. In Farmfoods, the staff simply slice open the original shipping crates and shove the contents directly onto basic metal racks. You might walk in looking for standard frozen peas and suddenly stumble across a random massive catering tub of mayonnaise that was clearly meant for a restaurant kitchen. This wild unpredictability is exactly what splits the British public straight down the middle. Half the country treats that chaotic setup like an absolute lifesaver during the cost of living crisis. Dedicated bargain hunters will happily brag online about digging through those freezers to unearth obscure frozen chicken products for just 9 pence. Meanwhile, the other half of the internet remains incredibly skeptical. They view those exact same messy aisles with deep suspicion and constantly complain that the entire store feels completely unorganized. But that unpolished vibe constantly reinforces the idea that you're getting an unbeatable deal. If the company spent millions making the store look expensive with mood lighting and artisan wooden displays, the customer would subconsciously assume the food was expensive too. Instead, the basic metal shelving, the blindingly bright fluorescent lights, and the products being sold straight out of giant ripped cardboard boxes act as relentless visual cues. They're all deliberately designed to scream absolute value the second you walk through the doors. That's unapologetic rejection of modern retail norms extends far beyond the physical shop floor and bleeds directly into how they actually get you through those said doors in the first place. If you look at the current grocery landscape, every major player like Tesco, Asda, or Sainsbury's is completely desperate for your personal data. They heavily incentivize you to download a proprietary app, scan a barcode on your phone at the checkout, and let their servers track exactly what you buy every single week. Data extraction has become the most valuable marketing tool of the 21st century, allowing these corporate giants to build frighteningly accurate profiles of your household spending habits just so they can hit you with highly targeted personal advertising. Farmfoods has looked at this multi-million pound digital arms race and completely ignored it. Instead, they rely on a marketing system that most modern retail experts and tech executives would consider absolutely obsolete. They use physical paper. Farmfoods relies heavily on a relentless campaign of paper leaflets delivered directly through the letterboxes of millions of British homes. They utilize the Royal Mail to blanket entire postcodes with glossy brochures advertising their latest frozen deals, and buried inside these leaflets are physical tear-out discount vouchers. When a family is actively struggling to keep up with rising household bills, a physical paper voucher sitting right there on the kitchen counter serves as a constant, tangible reminder of potential savings. It successfully prompts a dedicated store visit much better than a digital push notification that gets instantly swiped away and forgotten. Even when Farmfoods finally decided to acknowledge the internet, they completely refused to change this winning formula. They do maintain a very basic email list you can sign up for, but the webpage asks for the absolute bare minimum of personal information. This digital list primarily exists just to send you barcode versions of those exact same paper vouchers. Their downright refusal to function like a modern company might rub a lot of retail experts the wrong way, but that dismissive attitude completely vanishes the second you actually look at the company financials. When Farmfoods recently filed their accounts, they reported that their total annual sales pushed past the £1 billion mark for the very first time in their 70-year history. They also increased their national headcount to nearly 5,000 employees. But generating £1 billion in sales doesn't magically mean you get to keep £1 billion in profit. The discount grocery sector is essentially a knife fight in a phone box, heavily reliant on constantly promising the customer the lowest possible price on the high street. When you make that ironclad promise to the public, you're forced to operate on incredibly thin margins where you make mere pennies on every single transaction. The entire system relies on moving massive volumes of stock just to make the basic math work. And making that math work has become incredibly difficult lately because the baseline cost of running a national supermarket has absolutely skyrocketed. The electricity required to run hundreds of industrial chest freezers across 300 stores 24 hours a day is astronomical. When global energy prices spiked recently, Farmfoods felt the financial pain immediately. You then have to add in the aggressively rising cost of commercial logistics, the diesel required to fuel their massive fleet of delivery trucks, and mandatory increases to the national minimum wage for their thousands of workers. All of those already thin profit margins suddenly got squeezed even tighter from every possible direction. Because the company openly refused to pass those rising costs on to the shopper, their actual day-to-day profits from selling food fell off a cliff, dropping from over £23 million in 2023 down to just under £10 million in 2024. Yet, when you look at their final report for the year, they still managed to post a massive overall profit of over £30 million, and they pulled this trick off by using a very clever real estate trick. Farmfoods actually owned a lot of the physical buildings where their shops are located. To get a massive injection of cash, they simply sold those buildings to private investors and then immediately rented them back. This specific move gave the business an instant £23 million payday, which they used as a financial shield to hide the heavy blows of food inflation and soaring energy bills. To keep those massive revenue numbers climbing and justify those complex real estate moves, Farmfoods realized they could no longer rely entirely on their historical strongholds. For decades, the brand was viewed as a distinctly Scottish and Northern English phenomenon. Their absolute power base was firmly rooted in places like Glasgow, Aberdeen, and the working-class industrial towns of the north. Sticking to those regions made perfect sense both culturally and logistically for a very long time. However, the executive team eventually recognized a harsh reality. You simply can't build a massive national retail empire while completely ignoring the wealthiest and most densely populated part of the country. To secure their future, Farmfoods decided to aggressively push south. This southern expansion has them openly targeting the London area and the broader southeast with a level of ambition that completely caught the grocery industry off guard. Back in early 2024, their property team revealed plans to open between 20 and 30 new shops every single year by focusing heavily on securing prime real estate locations in and around the capital. To actually survive such a notoriously expensive environment, their core strategy relies on targeting specific retail parks and suburban high streets where local residents are feeling the exact same cost of living squeeze as the people back in Aberdeen. The leadership team knows perfectly well that the desperate demand for affordable bulk food isn't restricted by geography, but they're definitely not just blindly opening new stores and hoping for the best. This entire southern push is highly calculated and completely ruthless. Because the company is constantly evaluating the financial performance of their existing estate, they're quietly shutting older, less profitable stores in their traditional northern heartlands. At the exact same time, they're aggressively hunting for massive new units down south. Nothing illustrates this ruthless pragmatism better than them permanently closing their original first ever store on Barron Street in Aberdeen after nearly 50 years of continuous operation. Farmfoods simply doesn't let historical sentimentality get in the way of a profitable spreadsheet. If a legacy store is too small and doesn't fit the modern high-volume operational model, they'll pull the metal shutters down for good without a single second thought. But filling massive new stores with industrial freezers is one thing. Actually keeping those freezers constantly stocked requires a supply chain that borders on the miraculous. Dealing so heavily in frozen food is an absolute logistical nightmare compared to a standard grocery operation. A normal supermarket can casually throw a pallet of dry cereal into a sweltering hot warehouse and leave it there for a month without a single worry. Farmfoods doesn't have that luxury. They're forced to maintain a continuous and completely unbroken chain of sub-zero temperatures from the absolute second a product leaves the manufacturing plant. The food has to travel onto a refrigerated delivery truck, move seamlessly into a massive regional distribution center, get loaded back onto another lorry, and finally arrive perfectly frozen inside the store. The stakes are incredibly high every single day. If a delivery vehicle breaks down on the motorway, or if a store freezer loses power for even just a few hours, the financial consequences are absolutely catastrophic. Thousands of pounds worth of inventory would quickly thaw out and would be instantly destroyed. To manage this incredibly fragile system, the company partners heavily with industrial refrigeration specialists working together to engineer state-of-the-art cold storage facilities across the country. They recently poured serious investment into expanding a massive cold store facility in the Midlands, which now serves as the beating heart of their aggressive southern expansion. They know perfectly well that every single mile one of those refrigerated trucks drives costs the business heavy amounts of money, burning through expensive diesel fuel and driver wages. So, by cleverly centralizing their massive freezers and by ruthlessly optimizing their delivery routes, they managed to shave crucial pennies off the logistical cost of every single bag of frozen peas. There's zero room for even the slightest inefficiency anywhere in the pipeline. This intense logistical pressure is the exact reason their stores look so chaotic. Product almost always displayed directly in the exact same cardboard box they were shipped in. The company completely refuses to pay staff to stand around carefully stacking individual tins of beans into perfect little pyramids. Instead, a worker simply uses a knife to slice the top off a shipping box and shoves the entire thing directly onto the metal shelf. It may look messy to the average shopper, but skipping that tedious stacking process saves precious seconds of labor. When you multiply those saved seconds across thousands of workers in hundreds of stores, it translates into millions of pounds kept firmly inside the company bank account every single year. And that messy, cardboard-heavy presentation actually completely changes the way consumers interact with the physical store and offers a fascinating look right into the psychology of modern shopping. As the brutal cost of living crisis deepened across the UK over the last few years, a very strange cultural shift started to take hold of the public. Shopping for extreme grocery bargains went from being a quiet and private necessity to a highly publicized spectator sport. People on platforms like TikTok and YouTube suddenly began dedicating entire channels exclusively to finding the absolute cheapest possible meals for their audiences. Farmfoods quickly found itself sitting right at the absolute center of this massive online movement. Thrifty foodies and dedicated bargain hunters started posting viral videos racing through the fluorescent aisles just to hunt down obscure 49p noodle pots or insanely cheap 9p packets of Jaffa cakes. The sheer randomness of the frozen inventory actually transformed into one of their biggest selling points. When you walk into a traditional HighStreet supermarket with a handwritten list, you fully expect to find exactly what you need sitting in the exact same aisle it was in last week. When you step through the doors of a Farmfoods though, you're essentially walking into a completely unpredictable treasure hunt. This unpredictability actively triggers a very specific kind of dopamine hit for the everyday shopper. When you finally stumble upon a genuinely incredible deal on a recognizable branded item, you get a sudden rush because you feel like you've successfully beaten the entire retail system. Also, you're practically forced to buy the item immediately because you know for a fact that the exact same product might not be there if you wait until next week. That constant product rotation creates a genuine sense of urgency that highly polished supermarkets desperately struggle to replicate. A giant like Sainsbury's works very hard to provide a calm and entirely predictable shopping environment where you can easily zone out on autopilot. Farmfoods shatters that comfort zone and provides a high-stakes scavenger hunt that forces the customer to engage actively with every single shelf and freezer bin. They're brilliantly leveraging the exact same psychological hooks used by famous discount clothing retailers like TK Maxx, but they're applying that addictive thrill of the chase directly to frozen chicken wings and bulk toilet roll. That addictive thrill of the chase keeps the bargain hunters coming back week after week, but Farmfoods still faces some massive hurdles as they navigate the future. Their stubborn refusal to change their core business model comes with a very unique set of challenges. Relying so heavily on thousands of industrial chest freezers leaves the entire company incredibly vulnerable to the wild and unpredictable swings of the global energy markets. We already know their recent strategy of selling off physical property assets successfully padded their bottom line for the year, but the obvious problem is that selling your own real estate isn't a magic financial trick you can repeat indefinitely. Eventually, you run out of buildings to sell and you're forced to rely purely on those razor-thin grocery margins once again. On top of the rising energy costs, they're also operating under the constant threat of strict government regulation. The UK government has been steadily tightening the legal rules around the promotion of foods that are high fat, salt, and sugar. A huge chunk of the Farmfoods inventory consists of the exact categories targeted by health regulators. If new laws completely restrict their ability to heavily advertise multi-buy deals on frozen pizzas or heavily processed meats, their beloved paper leaflet strategy could face some very serious friction. Instead of panicking or pivoting to a trendy health food model to appease the critics, the company is simply doubling down on exactly what they know works. They're actively investing millions of pounds into expanding their cold distribution network and opening up much larger footprint stores across the country. They're essentially just building bigger and more efficient factory floors for everyday retail. Their undivided focus remains entirely on pushing massive volume through the tills as fast as humanly possible to offset those tight profit margins. Their ultimate long-term strategy is incredibly clear. Farmfoods is making a massive corporate bet that the intense economic pressure on the average British consumer isn't going away anytime soon. They're aggressively wagering that as long as household budgets remain tight, everyday people will happily continue to overlook the bright fluorescent lights and the chaotic cardboard aisles in exchange for a significantly lower grocery bill at the checkout. They're gambling their entire billion-pound empire on the simple idea that utility will always beat high-end aesthetics whenever real money is actually on the line. Farmfoods is a masterclass in knowing exactly what you are and refusing to apologize for it. They looked at the retail trends of the last 20 years. They saw the rise of the digital loyalty app, the shift toward organic artisan breads, and the obsession with sleek store designs. They looked at all of it, and they completely ignored it. They decided to stay in their lane and decided to keep printing paper leaflets, stacking cardboard boxes on the floor, and filling giant freezers with cheap food. They proved that in the cutthroat world of British supermarkets, you don't need to be fancy to be successful. You just need to deliver on your core promise. They promised cheap food and they built an unbreakable, highly efficient machine to deliver exactly that. But what do you reckon? Are you someone who actively hunts for those obscure bargains in the bottoms of a Farmfoods freezer? Or do the paper leaflets piling up on your doormat drive you absolutely mad? Drop your thoughts in the comments section below. We want to hear your best or worst experiences navigating the chaotic aisles of the frozen food giant. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the business of supermarkets, give us a like, hit subscribe, and ring that bell so you don't miss the next video. Anyways guys, thank you so much for watching and stay curious.